Today's experience is that of a sister who was once a Buddhist. She had this experience when she was 14 years old, but today she chose to share her 7 years ago experience. We hope you get blessed as you stay to the end. My name is Ananya Advik. I was 14 when I had this near-death experience. School was a place where history felt alive to us, not just something in books. My teachers often told us we were carrying forward a legacy, reminding us of those who fought for our country's independence. Every class felt like a lesson in honor and respect, and our admiration always circled back to one man, Mahatma Gandhi. I remember how each time his name was mentioned, a sense of pride filled the classroom. To us, Gandhi was more than a leader. He was the embodiment of peace, resilience, and justice. In my history class, our teacher, Mrs. Joshi, often described Gandhi as a man who could bring change without raising his voice or lifting a weapon. She told us stories of his Salt March and how he inspired millions to stand together without violence. One afternoon, she gathered us around a small projector screen and showed us photos from that era. As his face flashed on the screen. At lunch, we sometimes sat under a large banyan tree discussing what we'd learned. My friends and I admired Gandhi as someone we could look up to, someone who had dedicated his life to India's freedom. It felt natural to feel this way about him because his face was everywhere, in our textbooks, on rupee notes, on street murals. I thought of him almost as a guide, one who showed how courage and kindness could change the world. Growing up in a Buddhist family, I practiced meditation and learned the principles of peace and compassion. My parents taught me that enlightenment was the ultimate goal, and by following our spiritual path, we could escape suffering. We respected other religions, especially Hinduism, which was so common around us, but I always thought that our path was the one that led to peace. I knew of Christianity in passing, but it seemed foreign, almost too distant to matter. After school, I would sometimes accompany my parents to the temple, where I would join them in silent prayers, feeling the calmness that the familiar rituals brought. I believed that I was doing everything right, following the teachings and practicing the peace I'd been raised with. At 14, I felt certain that by honoring my heritage, studying Gandhi's values, and following our faith, I was on the right path, a path that I thought could lead only to goodness. It was a regular school day. I was walking home with my school bag as I hurried along the crowded streets. My friends had taken different paths, so I was alone, following the familiar route through the marketplace. The vendors called out their usual prices, children played along the sidewalks, and people moved busily around me. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, yet I felt a strange, subtle ache in my chest. I shrugged it off, assuming it was just the heat or exhaustion from school. As I turned the corner toward my street, the ache suddenly sharpened, and it was like my breath got trapped inside me. I stopped, gripping my chest, feeling a pounding inside that grew more intense by the second. I wanted to call out, but my voice felt caught and my vision blurred. Everything around me became muffled, like I was hearing the world from underwater. I could barely make out people's faces as they passed by, glancing at me in confusion. Just as I tried to step forward, my legs gave way, and I felt myself falling. Then silence. I didn't hit the ground as I expected. Instead, I felt weightless, as if something had lifted me up. I looked down and saw my own body lying on the street, a small crowd gathering around. People were shouting, someone had their phone out, likely calling for help, but the voices seemed to fade, like they were drifting away. I tried to reach out, to somehow pull myself back, but it was as though I was being pulled further and further away, faster than I could resist. The light around me began to dim, turning into a deep, unsettling darkness. The warmth of the sun, the noises of the street, everything disappeared, replaced by a thick, eerie silence that pressed against me. I felt a coldness that I had never known before, something far beyond physical, as though it was reaching into my very spirit. Panic rose within me as I realized that I was descending, being pulled down into something vast and unknown. The deeper I went, the heavier the darkness became, and with it came an overwhelming sense of dread. I knew somehow that I was no longer in any part of the world I recognized. The air around me was thick, suffocating, filled with an indescribable weight that seemed to press in from every direction. My heart, or whatever sense I had of it, felt like it was sinking deeper into this endless void, as if I were falling into the very core of despair. Then I felt it, a presence all around me, one that filled this dark place. It was more than fear, it was a hopelessness that penetrated everything, leaving no space for comfort or light. I tried to scream, to run, but there was no escape, no way to lift myself out of this place. It was as though I had entered a realm where all peace, all hope, had been utterly consumed, leaving only emptiness and torment. I felt it then, the harsh truth settling over me, this was hell. I was in hell and there was no way out. As this realization sank in, I knew with a chilling certainty that my life was gone, and what lay ahead was something I could never have imagined in my worst fears. As I stood there, if I could even call it standing, I felt as if my feet were submerged in something heavy and sticky, yet I could not see the ground. The darkness was so deep, so intense, it seemed to devour any sense of space or time. The silence that had pressed against me was now filled with faint, distant sounds, cries and moans that gradually grew louder. They came from every direction, yet the darkness gave no hint of where the sounds originated. It was as if the cries were part of the darkness itself. Slowly, details began to emerge in this blackness. In front of me, figures appeared, twisted in forms of agony I could barely comprehend. Adults, many I couldn't recognize, and children, yes, even children, were scattered around, their faces frozen in expressions of torment. There was no fire, no flickering flames casting shadows. The suffering here seemed to come from within the souls themselves, as if the very air and space around them caused pain. I moved, or rather was pulled, through scenes that were both unending and intensely personal. I could see souls contorted, clutching at themselves, as if trying to shield themselves from the oppressive weight of despair, but there was nowhere to escape. There were no demons, no visible tormentors, just an all-encompassing darkness, pressing down on everything with a malice that was almost alive. It was as though hell itself was the torment, a thick, penetrating force that twisted around and through every soul, dragging out their worst regrets and fears, forcing them to face them endlessly. I noticed one soul, an older woman, her hands reaching out, her mouth open in a scream that made no sound. Her face was lined with sorrow, as though she had spent a lifetime of moments reliving her regrets, yet there was no relief, no escape. The children, too, were scattered among them, their faces etched with confusion and sadness as they seemed to suffer in this place with the same intensity as the adults, locked in a torment they couldn't understand but could feel deeply. The darkness here was more than an absence of light, it was a tangible entity, pressing into every corner, every soul, suffocating them in an endless loop of despair. I could feel it, not just around me but inside me, filling me with a sorrow so complete it felt as if it would consume me. The souls around me writhed, not from any physical injury, but from the unbearable weight of remorse and hopelessness. As I moved through this desolate place, amidst faces both familiar and unknown, I suddenly saw him, a face I knew well. It was Mahatma Gandhi. There was no mistaking him. His image had been ingrained in my memory since childhood, through lessons, photographs, and murals that depicted his wise, compassionate face. But here, he looked nothing like the calm and dignified figure I had always admired. Instead, his face was contorted in agony, his eyes wide with a sorrow that felt endless. Gandhi's presence here filled me with disbelief. My teachers had praised his dedication to peace, his selflessness, his role as a leader in our nation's fight for independence. Yet here he was, engulfed in the same suffocating darkness as everyone else. The weight of his sorrow seemed to press into him, like it was squeezing the very essence of his soul, leaving him to bear regrets that I could feel even from where I stood. He revealed to me in those silent, heart-wrenching moments his longing for a second chance. He expressed a sorrow for rejecting Jesus Christ, a decision he once thought was inconsequential. I understood that he'd been told about Christ, even shown that Jesus was the only path to escape such a fate, but he had turned away, believing in the strength of his own faith. He let me know that his pride in his own beliefs, his unwavering confidence in his religious path, had blinded him. Now, faced with the reality of where those choices had led him, his pain was beyond words. His sorrow deepened as he reflected on the missed chances. There were moments, he let me know, where he'd been exposed to teachings about salvation through Christ, yet he had dismissed them, feeling assured in the Hindu principles he had devoted his life to. His regret was almost palpable, as if each missed opportunity replayed before him, driving the torment deeper. He revealed his sorrow over the conviction that he had lived for noble ideals yet missed the very path that could have saved him. Gandhi's suffering was not from flames or physical torture, but from the overwhelming sorrow of realizing he could have chosen differently. He was locked in a torment of unfulfilled longings, the realization of missed salvation weighing on him like a heavy, unrelenting burden. The darkness around him, the very essence of hell, seemed to reinforce this regret, amplifying it, holding him captive in the torment of lost redemption. I heard a voice, though I couldn't place where it came from. It was calm and steady, yet each word seemed to shake the foundations of this desolate place. The voice a word, and that Jesus is the way to the Father. In that moment, I saw the magnitude of lost opportunities, not only for those here but also for the ones still alive, who unknowingly walked the same path. I thought of the people I had known, the countless individuals in my life who, like me, had no idea what awaited them if they turned away from this truth. I opened my eyes slowly, only to see myself in the hospital. My body felt weak, as if it had been through something beyond physical endurance. Nurses moved around, adjusting tubes and murmuring words I couldn't quite catch, but none of it felt real compared to what I had just seen and felt. I had just witnessed the depth of torment, the lost hopes, and the eternal regrets of souls who had once walked the earth as I did. The knowledge that I had escaped that fate filled me with an overwhelming responsibility. I thought about how we often choose role models, idolizing those with great achievements, wisdom, or fame, but without discerning the foundation of their beliefs. I had looked up to people without ever questioning the direction they were leading me. Now, I knew better. Following someone who lacked the truth of salvation could lead others straight into darkness. I had seen for myself how even those who were celebrated in life could end up in the depths of regret. It wasn't their fame or good deeds that mattered in the end, but their acceptance of Jesus as their Savior. Without that, nothing else could save them. I realized that my own silence could contribute to someone else's ignorance, to someone else's downfall. I could no longer sit back and assume people knew the truth. Evangelism wasn't just a suggestion, it was an urgent call. There were countless people, friends, and family who walked this earth without understanding the importance of salvation. I had to tell them that faith in Jesus was not just a choice among many but the one and only path that could bring them to eternal life. In my heart, I resolved that I would dedicate myself to spreading this truth, to leading others away from the darkness and into the light. Thank you for staying to the end of this experience. Save a soul by sharing this video with your friends and families, so that they will be saved from the path of hell. Subscribe to our channel if you have not, to remain updated whenever we share another experience that is being sent to us. Thank you.